Hey everyone, NOAA, here the most powerful legislative body in the world, convened in a secret emergency session under cover of darkness. What happened next was not just a vote, it was a political earthquake that cracked the foundation of American government. At 2:47 a.m., the United States Senate delivered a historic, devastating blow to a sitting president from their own party. With a supermajority of 67 votes, including 19 Republicans, they passed a formal resolution declaring that President Donald J. Trump violated his sacred oath of office. This is not symbolic. This is not partisan theater. This is a constitutional condemnation born from evidence so shocking, so irrefutable, that it forced lifelong defenders to abandon their posts in a solemn late-night reckoning. When senators who shielded this president through 2 impeachments, countless scandals, and relentless controversy suddenly turn against him in the dead of night, you know a catastrophic event has just detonated in the heart of Washington. The political landscape you knew is gone. What emerges from the rubble will redefine the nation. So what evidence could possibly trigger such a stunning, unprecedented revolt from within the president's own ranks? According to multiple high-level intelligence and congressional sources, a leaked 47-minute audio recording from the White House Situation Room contains the president's own voice issuing direct, explicit orders to weaponize federal law enforcement. The tape, allegedly recorded on January 3rd, reportedly captures specific instructions to target political opponents with manufactured criminal charges. Senators who have heard the recording in secure facilities describe it as a smoking gun of unimaginable scale, not a suggestion, not a heated rant, but a deliberate, detailed directive to corrupt the justice system. This goes far beyond any previous scandal. It strikes at the very core of the constitutional order. And when 19 Republican senators break ranks to join Democrats in a public condemnation, crossing a line they vowed never to cross, you must understand, something fundamental has broken. The dam has not just cracked, it has been obliterated. To fully grasp the magnitude of this moment, we must rewind the tape. Tensions between this White House and the co-equal branches of government have been building like tectonic pressure for months. A series of executive actions seen as end runs around Congress, public clashes with federal judges, and a deeply frayed relationship with the Department of Justice created an atmosphere of permanent crisis. But the single spark that ignited the inferno arrived quietly on January 17th. A career intelligence analyst, a 17-year veteran of signals intelligence with a spotless record, made the most difficult decision of their life. Tormented by a constitutional duty that overrode all else, this individual provided the Senate Intelligence Committee with a digital package, a 47-minute audio file. This was not a partisan operative. This was a career civil servant, sworn to protect the nation, who concluded that silence meant complicity in the destruction of the republic itself. The contents of that recording, as described by 4 senators from both parties who listened in a secure, soundproofed facility, are so explicit they defy political spin. The meeting, held in the Situation Room, allegedly includes the President of the United States giving the following orders: targeted investigations, directives to the FBI director to open criminal investigations into 3 Democratic governors, Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, and Gavin Newsom of California. The reason cited was not evidence of any crime, but their effective political opposition. The president allegedly stated they needed to be neutralized before the next election cycle. Electoral timing. Specific instructions to coordinate with sympathetic state-level prosecutors to ensure any indictments would be unsealed during the heat of the presidential primary season. A move designed to create maximum media spectacle and derail the political process. Fabrication of evidence. The most damning element of all. The recording reportedly captures the president, frustrated that these governors hadn't actually committed crimes, ordering officials to plant evidence if necessary. This included discussions of creating false financial documents and coaching witnesses to give fabricated testimony. One direct quote, as recounted by a shaken senator, has become the focal point of the entire crisis. The president's voice allegedly said, "These governors need to be in handcuffs by Super Tuesday, and I don't care what you have to invent to make that happen." This was not a policy debate about law enforcement priorities. This was not the rough and tumble of politics. This was an alleged blueprint for turning the United States Department of Justice into a personal instrument of political vengeance, a crime syndicate operating from the Oval Office. The reaction within the hallowed, secretive halls of the Senate Intelligence Committee was one of immediate and profound horror. These are men and women accustomed to dealing with the nation's most sensitive secrets: terrorist plots, cyber attacks, foreign espionage. Yet, what they heard in that secure room on January 18th left them visibly shaken. Senator Angus King, the independent from Maine and a respected committee member, emerged to tell colleagues it was the clearest, most unambiguous abuse of power he had witnessed in his lifetime. "There is no room for interpretation here," he said. "The intent is laid bare. The crime is ordered in plain English." But the reaction that signaled the coming political earthquake came from a staunch conservative. Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, a man who stood steadfastly by the president through both impeachment trials and every prior controversy, listened to the tape in silence. When it ended, sources say he sat motionless for several minutes, his face pale. He then excused himself, telling his colleagues he felt physically ill and needed to call his wife before he could say another word. The evidence had bypassed political calculus and struck directly at moral conscience. This private horror soon forged a public resolve. On January 19th, a bipartisan group of 23 senators, 14 Democrats, 8 Republicans, and 1 independent convened in a closed-door emergency meeting. The atmosphere was described as grim and resolute. They were not there to debate politics. They were there to draft a response to what they believed was a fundamental betrayal. The result was a formal resolution of condemnation, a rare and severe parliamentary tool reserved for the most egregious breaches of trust. The language, obtained by major news outlets, was brutally direct. It accused the president of subverting the Department of Justice, ordering the fabrication of criminal evidence against American citizens, and conspiring to use federal law enforcement as a weapon against political opponents. It concluded that these actions constitute a betrayal of the presidential oath and a direct assault on the constitutional order. The stage was now set for a historic night on the Senate floor, a session that would unfold not under the bright lights of daytime C-SPAN, but in the shadowy, solemn quiet of a Washington midnight. At 11:40 p.m. on January 19th, the resolution was formally introduced. Senate Majority Leader John Thune, following traditional leadership protocol, initially moved to table the measure, to delay it indefinitely. But then came the first shockwave of the night. In a stunning procedural rebellion, 12 Republican senators joined every Democrat and independent to override their own leader. The motion to force an immediate vote passed, 61-39. The rebellion was already alive. What followed was an hour of profound, almost sacred solemnity. The usual hum of the Senate chamber was replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. C-SPAN cameras, broadcasting to a stunned nation, captured surreal images. Senior senators with their heads bowed low, some seemingly in prayer, others staring blankly at the vaulted ceiling as if seeking guidance. Veteran journalists in the press gallery reported they could hear the rustle of a page turning from across the room. The silence was that deep. Staff members lined the mahogany walls, many with tears openly streaming down their faces. It was, according to senators who served during 9/11 and the January 6th attack, the most grave and solemn atmosphere they had ever witnessed. Then, at 2:31 a.m., the moment that will be etched in history books arrived. Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the longtime Republican leader, the strategic architect of the modern conservative judiciary, the man who twice voted to acquit Donald Trump in impeachment trials, rose slowly to his feet. The chamber fell even quieter, if that was possible. His voice, when he began to speak, was not the familiar tactical drawl, but a steady, mournful tone laden with gravity. "I have spent 38 years in this institution," he began, "defending the constitutional prerogatives of the presidency, often against those who I believed were too eager to diminish them." He paused, looking around at his colleagues. "What we have heard in that recording is not an exercise of executive authority, ordering the fabrication of evidence, directing the federal police to imprison political opponents on invented charges. That is not presidency. That is tyranny." The word tyranny, uttered by Mitch McConnell, echoed through the silent chamber like a gunshot. Several senators gasped audibly. Senator Susan Collins of Maine was seen dabbing her eyes with a tissue. The political significance was instantaneous and earth-shattering. In one word, the foremost guardian of Senate republicanism had eviscerated the primary defense of the president. This was no longer a partisan witch hunt. This was a constitutional judgment from within the heart of his own party. McConnell continued, his voice growing thicker with emotion. He spoke of his father, who fought against tyranny in World War II. He quoted the founders' fears of concentrated, unaccountable power. Some votes, he said, his words measured and final, transcend politics. They transcend party. They transcend even the next election. Some votes are simply about whether we still believe in the republic we swore an oath to defend. This is such a vote. With that, the roll call was a foregone conclusion. The final tally, recorded at 2:47 a.m., 67 ayes, 33 nays. 19 Republican senators had crossed the Rubicon. The condemnation was official, bipartisan, and historic. To understand why this break is so much more severe than any previous rupture, we must briefly revisit history. During Watergate, Republican support for Nixon eroded gradually over months, as evidence of the cover-up dripped out. He resigned when it became clear he had lost his political base in the Senate. This is different. This is not about a slow-drip revelation of a cover-up. This is about the sudden, audio-confirmed revelation of the core crime itself, not hiding a break-in, but ordering the machinery of justice to manufacture crimes. The first Trump impeachment involved a complex pressure campaign on a foreign leader. The second addressed the incendiary rhetoric and events of January 6th. Both were mired in debates over context, intent, and the precise definition of high crimes and misdemeanors. This allegation admits no such debate. Ordering federal agents to plant evidence and frame innocent citizens is not a gray area. It is a black and white felony. It is the bright, glaring red line the Founding Fathers imagined when they devised impeachment, the use of state power to crush political dissent and entrench one's own rule. The immediate aftermath of the vote was a study in stark contrasts, deafening public silence and frantic private chaos. Inside the Republican Party, sheer panic erupted. Emergency conference calls stretched through the pre-dawn hours. Factions hardened. One group, led by allies of the president, argued the party must circle the wagons and attack the process, the illegality of the leak, the deep state conspiracy. The other, larger and more shaken group, countered that the content of the tape was so devastating that defending it would morally bankrupt the party and destroy its future. They were trapped, truly trapped, between the ferocious loyalty of their base and the terrifying abyss of constitutional failure. Meanwhile, at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, an eerie and total silence descended. The White House, typically a 24-hour hub of spin and response, went completely dark. No press releases. No social media posts from the president. The phones in the press office rang unanswered. For 7 agonizing hours, as dawn broke over a Capitol in crisis, the West Wing was a ghost ship. One senior official, speaking anonymously to Politico, described the scene as a wake. Staffers were seen carrying boxes of personal belongings to their cars, unsure if they would have jobs or if the administration itself would exist by the weekend. The world reacted with alarm. Financial markets across Asia and Europe plunged, and when the New York Stock Exchange opened, the Dow Jones Industrial Average plummeted 847 points in the first chaotic hour. The dollar weakened against global currencies. From London to Berlin to Tokyo, statements from allied governments expressed deep concern and a hope for stability, the diplomatic code for a regime in crisis. Russian and Chinese state media, meanwhile, aired wall-to-wall coverage, gleefully portraying American democracy as collapsing from within. At 9:43 a.m., the silence shattered. The president returned to his favored platform, Truth Social, not with a measured defense, but with a torrent of fury that seemed to confirm the very pattern of retaliation alleged in the tape. He posted a series of messages calling the vote a treasonous plot by Democrats, rhinos, and the deep state. He claimed the recording was a AI-generated fraud created by Soros-funded agencies. And most consequentially, he issued explicit threats. He named Senators McConnell, Collins, and Lankford, among others, calling them weak traitors and human fossils who would face the consequences and be primaried into oblivion. Legal scholars instantly pounced. Harvard's Lawrence Tribe noted that publicly threatening senators for performing their constitutional duty could itself constitute witness intimidation and obstruction of Congress. new potential crimes layered on top of the original allegations. The president's response was not a denial of the act, but a vivid demonstration of the mindset behind it. The instinct to retaliate and intimidate those who hold power accountable. This is where we stand. The implications are vast, deep, and terrifying for the nation's future. The political landscape is irrevocably altered. The condemnation resolution, while lacking the direct legal force of impeachment, is a political earthquake of the highest magnitude. It has broken the spell of unbreakable partisan loyalty. It gives permission and political cover for every other Republican official, donor, and voter to reconsider their allegiance. Overnight polling shows independent support for the president has collapsed, with 62% believing the allegations are serious enough to warrant his removal from office. Every Republican candidate in every race for the foreseeable future will be forced to answer an impossible question. Do you support a president who ordered the fabrication of evidence against his opponents? The legal cliff's edge is now in view. The House Judiciary Committee has announced it will gavel into emergency public hearings on January 22nd. Their task is straightforward: authenticate the tape and, if confirmed, draft articles of impeachment. Legal experts universally agree that if the recording is verified, this third impeachment would be fundamentally different. It would not hinge on complicated testimony or disputed motives. It would be built on the president's own voice ordering specific felonies. As former Trump defender and legal scholar Jonathan Turley stated, "No theory of executive privilege or immunity stretches far enough to cover the direct order to commit a crime. If this tape is real, it is indefensible. The institutional damage is already critical. The professional backbone of the United States government is in crisis. Within the Department of Justice and the FBI, career officials are in a state of turmoil and despair. Several senior prosecutors have already submitted resignation letters. The FBI Agents Association, representing over 14,000 active and retired agents, issued an extraordinary statement expressing grave and profound concern over the politicization of their mission. A flash poll of federal law enforcement officers found 73% are worried about the integrity of their agencies. When the rank and file who enforce our laws lose faith in their own leadership's adherence to the law, the institution itself is on the brink of failure. This crisis ultimately transcends Donald Trump. It is the ultimate stress test of the American system devised in 1787. The central question is this: if a sitting president can order the fabrication of evidence to imprison political rivals and face no ultimate conclusive accountability, then what is the rule of law but a fiction? If there are no consequences, a precedent is set that would allow any future president of any party to jail journalists, activists, business leaders, or rivals on manufactured pretexts. The delicate balance of power would be permanently broken, tilting irrevocably toward the executive. The republic, as a system of laws and not of men, would cease to exist. The coming hours and days will be decisive. The House hearings will commence under a global spotlight. The Senate Intelligence Committee is preparing a potentially redacted transcript of the fateful recording for public release. Whispers among cabinet members about the invocation of the 25th Amendment are no longer fantasy, but a reported topic of hushed discussion. Reassuringly, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has privately confirmed to congressional leaders that the military's allegiance remains solely to the Constitution, a routine assurance that in this moment carries the weight of the nation's future. The evidence is before them. The condemnation is etched into the Senate record. The White House responded first with silence, then with threats. 67 senators, in the solemn quiet of a Washington midnight, made a choice. They chose the Constitution over party, the Republic over a man, the future over the present. This is no longer about politics. It is about the principle that no one is above the law. It is about whether that principle has any force, or whether it is merely words on parchment, swept away by the winds of power. The vote is over. The crisis is now. America and the world holds its breath.